and we begin.
Okay, so here we are kicking off our first webinar of 2024. So yay, thank you for being part of the journey and thank you for being here at the start of the year. Hopefully we'll have you with us at the end of the year and many, many more. So who are we? Just real quick, Global Slovakia, we're a nonprofit organization. We share Slovakia with the world. We do this through books, our online academy, our in-person experiences, real true rites of passage when you come here to Slovakia and experience the country with us. In addition to that, we also crusaded on your behalf to help change the Slovak Citizenship Act that came through in April 2022. This was a real pivotal shift in terms of the law and accessibility of citizenship for Slovak descendants. If any of you are interested, please send us an email. We'd love to inform you more about the process. It is rather complicated, but the reward is tremendous. It's Slovak citizenship. If you're not eligible for Slovak citizenship because your ancestor came over before 1910 or fourth or fifth generation from them, removed from there, there's also a wonderful document or a certificate that you can get, which is called the Slovak Living Abroad Certificate, the SLA. And that is equivalent to, let's say, a US green card, except it has no time limit and it grants you the right to live and work and study or retire in Slovakia. So it's a wonderful tool to have. And through that tool, you can also acquire citizenship, but are actually required to live in the country. So that's all for me. I hand it over to you, Gabby.
Okay, thank you, Susie. So we would like to now jump right into it. No need to delay this wonderful presentation. You are in for a real treat because today we have Mark Dillon as a special guest of our very first webinar of the year. Mark is an accomplished journalist. He is the chair of directors of the Czechoslovak Genealogical Society International, and he is also the Minneapolis bureau chief at Polish American Journal. He has a long-standing personal and professional interest in Slovakia and Slovak history and culture. And today he will walk you through the work and legacy of one of the, if not the most iconic Slovak architect, Dušan Jurkovič. So Mark, over to you. Welcome. It's a great pleasure to have you join us.
Well, thank you, Gabriella and Susanna. It's a pleasure to be here this morning and this evening. So I'm a fourth generation Slovak, married to an architect in a family with engineers. My nephew's a home builder, and my grandfather was a blacksmith. So building things is sort of in the blood. And I like to think that at CGSI, we're actually been building the largest genealogy and cultural bridge between North America and Central Europe between generations. So Global Slovakia describes Dušan Jurkovič as the first Slovak architect, but really he's a lot more than that. Jurkovič defined architecture as both Czech and Slovak identity was being formed 2 decades before the birth of Czechoslovakia. So let us go now to the PowerPoint. And hopefully everybody can see that. That is Dušan at the height of his career. And so Jurkovič was as impactful for both the Czech Republic and Slovakia as Frank Lloyd Wright was in the US during that same arts and crafts period. He saw architecture as a cultural expression and allowed heritage, tradition, and faith to drive design. It wasn't about his ego, nor was it the nationalistic and socialistic realism tastes that were popular as his nation descended into the TISO and the communist periods. So last year was his 155th anniversary of his birth. He was born in Majava, son of Jurak and Emilia. His father was a notary, and he was a Protestant. And his grave is actually in the same village as the tomb that he would famously design for Milan Rastislav Stefanik. I was briefly in Majava last May when my wife and I did a cross-country tour of Slovakia. And as a testament to his fame, several years ago, the European Union issued a 10 euro coin in his name, and it really the subtitle of my talk today is rooted in time, because that was really Yurkovich's signature philosophy, and he drew from the past to honor the work of many architects, carpenters, and artists who have given both the Czech Republic and Slovakia its rich history and give voice to its present designs. So his work took a lot of different architectural forms, and he worked in a lot of different sectors. And like many architects today, just specialize in one segment. But he built cemeteries, hospitality industry, monuments, affordable housing for the Czech legionnaires. He was very versatile, and he may have been Slovak by birth, but he built his career and found love in Moravia. And he drew from Carpatho-Russian wood carving traditions to inform his design. And so it was kind of a new shared Czechoslovak heritage that he is emblematic of. So his child was actually in a town that is now part of Hungary. It was on a lakefront area. It was very kind of a storybook town that's changed very little from medieval times. So this was really his first architectural experience. If we look where he was educated from 84 to 89, he attended college in Vienna, what is now the State Technical University, which was led by the famous Austrian architect and urban designer Camillo Sitte. And Sitte's view was that design should be led by the private sector, and especially urban planning, as it was in ancient Rome, which is quite a different philosophy than you see today, certainly in urban America. Sitte wrote a work in 1889 about urban planning and said that the municipal role should be confined to infrastructure and monuments, and that building should be the private initiative. What's interesting about Sitte is that Yurkovich wasn't Sitte's only famous student. Jurgan Milanova built the cathedral in Sofia, Bulgaria, after studying under Sitte, and another student in Croatia, Hugo Erlich, was responsible for the Zagreb Stock Exchange. So Yurkovich's educational background was part of a group of people who led the industry at the turn of the 20th century. And one of the big influences during Yurkovich's time was if any of you are architects out there, you'll know the 7 lamps of architecture. It really defines what the philosophy was at the time. There were basic principles of design that influenced many of the leading architects of the early 20th century and resulted in some of the greatest buildings in the world, especially in places that were rapidly developing, like major cities in the U.S., such as Chicago. And it's only been in the late 20th century and early 21st that some architects have taken a different approach. Some of you may be familiar with Frank Gehry. Certainly, Yurkovich did not favor originality for its own sake, but many of Gehry's works do today. So that was kind of just a contrast between the two. So let's look at Yurkovich's early career. So we're going down to about 1892, 1893, just about a year, just right before the Chicago World's Fair. And it was in Moravia that it was kind of a hotbed for expression of Czech nationalism, where at the fair there, he traveled to Prague, and he worked in the studio of Mikhail Urbanek in Vishtin, and in Moravia. And at the time, this kind of catalyzed his own ideas for design. And it was interesting that both the Czechs and Slovaks kind of embraced the ideas that Yurkovich and his peers were thinking about, while the German Bohemian Czechs kind of ignored the fair, and that was kind of prelude perhaps to other things. One of the Yurkovich's big first exhibits was in 1895, the reconstruction of a Czech village. And let's go. So if you overall look at how his career as a young adult in his 20s developed, he was really at the right place at the right time, and he was reckoned had the right mentor. His boss, Urbanik, was good friends with the mayor of Vesztin, Joseph Czernacki. And Czernacki was also a good friend of Thomas Masaryk, who happened to be at that time the representative from this area in the Imperial Council. So this was able to, the political powers at the time were able to actually secure some funding for infrastructure that helped fuel a building boom in Moravia, and that helped provided some of the funds for some of Yurkevich's early projects. And one of them in 1895 is the Vakelian villages and the ethnographic exhibition there. It's an open air museum in Moravia that exists today. Vakelia, just as a point of background, is an area that shares a common name and perhaps a common ancestry with the similar with the region in Romania. It dates from the 12th century when the town of Roznov was founded in 1267 by the Olmoric Bishop Bruno of Schomberg. And in the, if you want to read further about the connections between Romania and this area of Moravia, I encourage you, we at the CGSI did a webinar back in August where we partnered with the Romanian Genealogy Society to explore this aspect of culture. From a Yurkevich perspective, this really informed his design. If you look at some of the structures on the right here under the slide here, this is what was built. And here are some other structures that he designed in 1896, a lookout tower and a covered bridge. And so you kind of really see that it's kind of informed by some of the Carpatho-Rusin church structures in the wooden churches in Eastern Slovakia, as well as some of the designs in the Czech Republic. Really a blending of cultures. One question I saw just on the chat here is, how is this different from Zakopane in Poland? And having been in both places, I would say that the Moravian is a little more, you see a lot more reds and blues and color, whereas Zakopane is more in the yellow and gold color palette in terms of painting. And again, so moving a little forward to Yurkevich's next big project was the Pustavny complex, built several years at the end of the 19th century. And this consists of a large resort hotel and restaurant, and Lubushin, which is kind of a, the Czechs called it the Utulny, which was refuge mountain huts is probably the easiest translation. But it was an Art Nouveau style, very popular at the time. The Lubushin building actually had a fire in 2014, but my understanding has been rebuilt. And part of this complex was the Hotel Mamemka in 1899. And you can see that there's very ornate detail there, again, with the blue and reds that are typical of this region. Especially kind of a navy blue is a signature Moravian color. Here is Lubushin, and this is the fire that happened in 2014. My understanding is that it took about 80 million Czech krone to rebuild it beginning in 2019 or by 2019. And so that, I believe, has been reopened post-COVID. If you look at Dusan Yurkevich's interiors, they're really quite astounding. This is the level of detail that, again, almost looks like a wooden church in Eastern Slovakia, or that level of ornamentation and detail. But it's just a beautiful structure that's again rooted in the time when the ornamentation and the detailing are just outstanding. Also nearby is also the town of Radhus, and I just wanted to give a little aside there that there's a chapel there, but in front of the chapel is a statue of Saint Cyril and Methodius, those who are viewers in America, the sculpture that is there in the area that Yakovich designed is actually patterned for a design which is in the cathedral in St. Paul in Minnesota. So just a connection on both sides of the pond there that I share. If we now go back now to Yakovich's personal life, there's a kind of an evolution of his style as he moves to Brno, and he builds a retirement home for his father-in-law, who owns a factory in Brno and is the founder of the Brno Sokol. And again, he meets the right people at the right time. He marries Robert's daughter, Bozena Bartelmozova, and she outlives him until 1965. And they have three sons, Jan, Jurek, and Pavel. And so, yeah, this is a really happy time for Yakovich. That first decade of the 20th century. And again, if we look at some of the spa towns that where Yakovich did his hospitality work. Myself being from upstate New York, I like to think of it as the Saratoga of the Czech Republic. This was the area where composer spent 23 seasons here gaining inspiration and composing. I mean, Dvorak came to Iowa, but Janacek spent time here for his work. Really, the first major work for Yakovich in Slovakia was the federal house in Skalica, which was on the title slide of the presentation today. I had the good fortune of visiting it briefly in 2016. There I am with the umbrella on the right, and the €1.5 euro stamp that the Slovak Republic issued some years ago. And again, he's building his family, but he's also building his home, and here is his home that he created in 1906, illustrating many of the detail work that he kind of a combination of Prairie School and the Art Nouveau and the Vakelian villages. You can kind of see that all combined in both the exterior and the interior. And so that first decade before World War I, he's actually doing a lot more houses. He's got the Skarda apartments and several chateaus for both wealthy people and middle-income people. So again, like Frank Lloyd Wright, he's designing homes for all levels in society. One of a really important work for Yakovich, right just at the same period, was the Stations of the Cross at the Marian Shrine of Our Lady of Huston, which is the part of the Great Moravian Pilgrimage Trail for Catholics. And this is symbolic of the site in 1241 when the Mongol invasion was halted by a severe thunderstorm that after people began praying on the hill. And just in some of that same year in Poland, there's also the Shrine of Our Lady of Czestochowa, which again, a Marian miracle stopped the invasion. As of it has it's had many visitors, but this town of Huston, people may not know, there's actually a Huston, Texas, that is named for this site. So now we move to the World War I period, and Dusan Yakovich becomes a commissioned officer in the War Graves Unit, which is stationed in Krakow, Poland. And he, in 1916, he gets rather difficult job of building cemeteries for the many thousands of soldiers who died during the prior 2 years from August 1914, when the Russians invaded. It was really only until 1916 when they were able to actually to build the cemeteries, because they, wasn't until the spring of 1915 that the Russians were pushed out and pushed back through Ukraine by a combination of the German and Austro-Hungarian armies. And so this chart on the right shows where all of his cemeteries are that Yurkovich designed. In total, for 35, spread across both western or eastern Poland and Slovakia. And so here's Yurkovich in uniform, and one of the how my personal connection was to him was that there is a cemetery that is not far from my ancestral village on my grandfather's side of the Busha, which is on the main royal road from Gorlice to Bish. And so Yurkovich designed cemetery number 123 on a steep hill. This was a strategic point that the Austro-Hungarian army had to take as part of the breakout of the May 1915 offensive. And so here is some further detail of that cemetery. It was restored by the European Union a decade ago, back to its original grandeur. But you can see again some of the Russian and Czech influences in how the structure is made. Let's see. There you go. Next. Yeah, and just a point of background. This is how the cemetery is laid out on the right side there. And really, if you've been to places like, say, Arlington National Cemetery in the U.S. on a much smaller scale, but you do get the sense of a place of where many people sacrificed their lives. Again, like Gettysburg in the U.S. or other places in Europe. And so this is actually the view from the top of the hill, which I just thought I'd share since it's such a beautiful vista. Again, this is another of Yurkovich's cemetery, Cemetery 91 in Tarnów, Poland. They periodically do reenactments, World War I reenactments around that area. Again, each of Yurkovich's cemetery has some unique features, and you can see how the crosses are laid, are displayed. And what's interesting is you have many nationalities kind of mixed in as it was during the time of the Austro-Hungarian army. Again, here are some more. This is cemetery number 51. Again with these spires, and yeah, you had very multiple expressions of faith in how each of these designs were executed. But really is a thing of beauty. And one thing I have to say, so in Poland, I believe in Slovakia and the Czech Republic as well, they don't have the U.S. conception of perpetual care. But in this case, in the case of the military cemeteries, yes, these are permanent markers and that are maintained by the public. Again, I had the occasion to visit there in 2016 and 2018. Myself, my wife, and some of my extended family in Poland. But then this is again at the foot of the chapel in near Gorlice. And again, one thing I will note is that there are many local cemeteries or memorials. They're not necessarily designed by Yurkovich, but are throughout Slovakia. This is one that's in my Slovak ancestral village. I will also point out that on our CGSI website, we have presentations that we've done about some of the Eastern Slovakian cemeteries that Yurkovich has designed that are now being restored. And I believe one of my co-board members, Ron Matviak, who's a co-author of and very involved in those efforts, is here today. So I just wanted to mention that there's been a lot of restoration work post 1989 on some of these cemeteries. So we were going to move now from cemeteries to another aspect of Yukovic's work, which was factories. He designed a dynamite factory that and he moves to Bratislava and builds a new house for himself. And here is again some examples of his residential work. These are apartments in Bratislava. And this is one of his more famous buildings, which is a apartment building for veterans of the Czech Legion. So you could say, like Frank Lloyd Wright, he was a pioneer of affordable housing, and he used, he specified prefabricated construction to help keep down costs on some of these projects. But of course, the single most famous work of the Yukovic is Stefanik's tomb. And here now it is. It took four years to build. It is based on the travertine stone that is native to that area. Again, this is perhaps one of his lesser known works, but somewhat noteworthy. This factory that he built is now owned by the same company as the former Czech politician Babis's Argofart holding company. It's I believe also has some environmental concerns, but during the Soviet era, it was kind of notorious for manufacturing arms and employed up to 11,000 workers. It was originally created by Alfred Nobel, who's named for the prizes, but he was a munitions manufacturer. And so if we go to what happened after World War I just wanted to kind of give a summary of some of his projects here, because he pretty much did one or two a year, and was pretty active through the early 1930s. Again, another one of his to show that the flexibility and diversity of his design. He did the cable car station at Encian, and he actually did four, and it was built in the late 1930s. Again, a hospitality venue. I believe there's been some restoration work there. And so just here is just some views of that project. And these were the restoration plans. I'm not quite sure how far along they are. I believe they have started. Another aspect of Yukovic's work was that he did utility plants. And so I believe the construction of this project began in 2017. And it was kind of reinterpreted by the famous architect Zaha Hadid, who's the first woman to win the Pritzker Prize in architecture. And let's see. So one of Yukovic's last works was a monument to the Slovak national uprising in 1947, and it was later expanded to include a memorial to Holocaust victims. But you see, even there again, that similar design pattern that was in Stefanik's tomb. And so one of the lasting legacies of Yukovic is the annual Dusan Yukovic Prize, which is an architecture prize awarded annually. I have a photo here of a kind of affordable housing building, and that was the 2017 awardee. But this is available for people who want to compete for it. And wanted to offer some further reading about Yukovic. There's a book that was published in Slovak in 2012 by Dana Boratova. That is really a good work. There's also the Moravian Gallery website. Also, if you have time and want to view it, there is a great film. It is in Czech that is about his life and works in the Czech Republic. So, before we open it up to questions, I did wanted to add another little plug here for CGSI. We are having a big global symposium at the National Czechoslovak Museum in Cedar Rapids in Iowa in April, and you're all invited. This is a live event, some of the presentations will be on our membership site afterwards. But it's it's also the museum's 50th anniversary, so it'll be a big event. And I did finally want to mention, since this is a Slovak presentation, that CGSI will begin offering beginner Slovak language classes beginning in March, and you can go to our website to find out more about that. It's a pretty modest fee, but openings are limited. But we welcome you, and our instructor there, she actually lives in Alaska, and so this will really be a global opportunity. So with that, I wanted to turn it over to back to Gabriella and Susanna for questions.
Hi, Mark. Thank you so much.
Sorry, that was me.
Okay. I'll just stop sharing so we can all be on the screen. Great. And yes, thank you, Mark, and thank you, CJCI, because this webinar was brought to you in partnership with this wonderful organization. And we would now like to welcome all your questions. I already saw a few in the chat. So if you would like to come on and ask those questions like face to face, it makes it more interactive and more enjoyable for everyone. Please don't be shy. I believe Zuzi Dusan Jurkovic is one of your favorite architects, right?
Actually, it's the other gentleman.
Oh, the other gentleman.
Yes, the one that went on and built the first skyscraper in Shanghai. His name is eluding me right now.
Well, you can find out more about that because we did a webinar at CGSI on other Czechoslovak architects, including the guy who built Shanghai. There's a great book about that as well.
Yeah, he's quite a few countries compete for him because he was born in Slovakia, but his mother was Hungarian, so the Hungarians claim him as a national hero. But then he actually lived in Asia for a while before immigrating and naturalizing in the United States. So then the Americans also claim him, but he had a special request when he was on his deathbed, and it was to have his ashes buried in Slovakia. So that's where we see where his true allegiance falls, which is the motherland where he was born. But Jurkovic is also a wonderful architect. What he did for Milan Rastislav Stefanik, I've seen both of the monuments in Bradlo, but there's also one right by the Bratislava airport, which is actually where Stefanik's plane fell or was shot at, depending on what theory
Yeah, so that's coming up on the 105th anniversary of that in 1919.
Yeah, and so that's more tragic. It's a pyramid and it's a very solemn monument. But actually, where Stefanik's remains are buried, which is the Bradlo monument. I mean, I've never seen anything like that in Slovakia. I feel it's very almost like fit for a pharaoh. It's very Egyptian-esque, over the top, and the fact.
I was wondering if there is anybody who actually visited any of Jurkovic's buildings designed by Jurkovic, or indeed the Bradlo monument.
Al has a question.
Well, I wanted to ask. Yeah, I've been to Bradlo, and it's a wonderful structure. And I know that you could share a little more information about the fundraising that went on and the building of that project.
Gabby has a great story about that.
Yeah.
Hang on. Just one.
I think, yeah.
Sorry, Zoom changed a few things around, so it takes me a little while to find people and pin them. So actually, Mark, would you like to get started on that one? And maybe I can fill in?
That is an area that I don't know a whole lot about the fundraising, but I would imagine that would be comparable to Pulitzer raising funds for the Statue of Liberty pedestal in New York.
Yeah, so Czechoslovakia partly sponsored that project, but a lot of the funds were actually from public collections, so people contributing all over Czechoslovakia, but also the Czechoslovak community in the United States. The monument was built remarkably fast. I think that was, what was it, like 2 years?
Took four years to complete, but considering the scale of it, that's pretty reasonable.
And during that time, I mean, that was exceptional speed. And the fact is that just to understand what kind of people were donating, I mean, from my understanding, Gabriela, it was predominantly local people donating, you know, pennies on the dollar, but also their time. From what I saw of the photography, that they were helping to carry up the rocks and building materials.
Yeah, because the rocks were sourced from Eastern Slovakia, from a Spiš region. That's the beautiful white rock that shines into distance. And yeah, Bradlo is the highest hill in the area. There was no infrastructure there. Now there is a road, of course, that takes you all the way to the monument, but back then there was nothing. So it was people carrying the stones on their back and in horse-pulled carriages.
When you think about that time period, people were still recovering from World War I, and their personal finances weren't all that great, and so it really a testament to the sacrifice and the belief in Stefanik as a hero for Slovakia.
And the great love for this man. Oftentimes we see that a nation begins to appreciate the hero a little bit later on, after they pass, but this was immediate.
It was a great tragedy, actually. When his plane was coming back, weren't they actually planning festivities, a parade and a major reception near you, Gabriela, in Záhorie?
Alica, actually, that was mentioned today. So
Stefanik meant, not that this presentation is about Stefanik, but Stefanik, even while he was alive, was already a major symbol of Slovakness, Slovak identity, Slovak pride. So it was a huge tragedy when he passed away or was shot down. And it's amazing that Jurković, you know, picked up on it right away and built such a monolithic monument in honor of his remains, to be amplified into the stars and to be forever commemorated. And whenever I visit Gabby in Záhorie, in Western Slovakia, where this monument is actually quite close to her house, we like to go up there to get inspiration and to connect with the greatest hero of all time, which is Stefanik. But Gabby, you often go there, no, for sunrises and sunsets.
I do go. It's a beautiful, well, if you have visited, it's a special place. It's not just a monument. You really see the greatness of the man, but also the enormous size of the gratitude that Slovaks feel for him, and also like the weight and or kind of the irony maybe of life. So Stefanik helped to make Czechoslovakia come true. Without him, perhaps the state would never exist. But he never returned to the freed Slovakia. As Zuzana said, on his first trip back, he crashed in Bratislava. So there's so much in that location that you get to pick up on when you are there in person.
Yeah, I just want to mention a point about the Jurković's many other cemeteries that it provides a great opportunity for people to research their ancestors, because you know these are people who died in mostly in Poland or in Eastern Slovakia during the Carpathian Winter War, and it may be in some cases this may be the only record that's available about some family members who served and died. But you really get a sense of being on those cemeteries, how he designed it to give honor to the people who died, whether they were just common soldiers or officers. So Jurković would have been serving in the military at the same time Stefanik was flying missions into Przemysl as one of the, I think it was not well known that he was one of the first airmail pilots who was dropping correspondence during the siege of Przemysl.
Mark?
Jurković and Stefanik were childhood friends. They came from the same area. So yes, please, next question.
Professor Kopane?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I visited Gradlo first in 1983. and the communists did nothing to it. I was the only one there. It was high grass. The thing was deteriorating. It was just awful. And I've been there twice since, and it's changed completely. I've also visited the Gorlice monument that Yurkovich made, because I did a cemetery tour. What I wanted to ask you is, did Yurkovich actually know Stefanik well? Because I've read they were friends, and I was wondering if you touched on that subject.
You know, I didn't really explore that aspect. I knew I know of them. I don't know how often they met. Certainly, he was you know, fully appreciated his work.
Well, because he was in Austria-Hungary during the war, and Stefanik, if they met each other, it must have been before World War I sometimes. And
it's possible, you know, because they would have traveled in the same circles in terms of the you know, with Masaryk. And
I think actually here Gabriella can answer that. Gabby?
Well, I don't know about the personal connections, but like, we know they've been childhood friends. The intelligentsia, the Protestant intelligentsia in Slovakia was tiny back then, so of course they gravitated, you know, around each other. They were moving in the same circles. But yes, Stefanik actually left the territory of Slovakia after his university studies to pursue the opportunities that Paris and France offered. And he never turned back. I don't know whether he was, he did come back, but he did not come back since the beginning of the First World War. Because of course, as I know, he was already employed by the French army as a general. Later on, he started off as a pilot. He was considered the enemy of state, so he could not return to Austria-Hungary at the time. And when he did, it was too late for the friends to be reunited. So the news of Stefanik's death actually came as a big shock to Yurkovich.
Yeah, well, Michael, you raised a good point about the you know, during the communist period, these cemeteries and works of Yurkovich were many were neglected, and it's really been since 1989 that the restoration efforts have improved. And you know, I guess as you know, again, I don't know if there's anyone who's visited any of the cemeteries recently, but you know, that period of neglect has ended.
I'm wondering if you could, because you went through it fairly quickly, could you bring up the picture of the monument again from your slide presentation?
Okay, sure.
Here, if people are not familiar with it, it would be worth maybe taking a quick look again so that they understand.
And there was actually sorry. There was a question in the chat. I didn't know whether you have any information about that, Mark, about the 4 pillars of the monument, why there were 4 pillars.
You know, that is a good question that I know that sort of again, a nod to Egyptian design, which is very popular during that period. Just around the same period, the World War I museum was designed in the U.S., which also had four symbols of, and I'm not sure if this is the same representation, but I believe it was courage, fortitude, sacrifice, and another value. So it may be you know, an illustration of you know, values.
Gabriella?
Yes.
I asked that question and I was kind of looking for a confirmation of information I read in a book pertaining to the document. It represents the 4 people that were killed in the accident.
Oh, okay. I misspoke there.
Well,
I'm sure.
I think there are a
there's
bunch of theories.
Yeah, much more deeper symbolism than just that. But
I heard a story that Yurkovich, at the time, people were really inspired by the Slavic history and Slavic mythology and spirituality, such as Josef Mucha. It's kind of the same time area that we're talking about here. And according to that theory, I don't know how much there is to it, but the monument was also built as a representation of an old Slavonic temple dedicated to god of war, accidentally, and harvest, that used to stand in modern day Ukraine, I believe, and that also had 4 pillars. So it could also correspond to 4 cardinal directions. There's probably a lot in there.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and Gabrielle, you mentioned about the kind of the pre-Christian period, and that's some of the work that Yukovic did at Radhost. There's I think one of the pagan sculpture to one of the pagan goddesses, but those motifs also influenced some of his work in Czech Republic.
All right, so do we have any more questions? Let's really use this opportunity that we have Mark Dillon on the call with us.
I'm curious to know a little bit more about the cross designs at the cemeteries. One of them has an arch that almost looks like it's designed to be a shroud. That one right there.
Yes. Yes, I think this is and maybe someone could correct me, who is actually a Rusin, but that is very typical in the Carpatho-Rusin areas to have that type of design on crucifixes.
So let's actually make this interactive. Is anybody on this call that is Rusin and that can confirm Mark's statement that this is a kind of standard Rusin cross?
We do actually see the cross a lot, especially in Eastern Slovakia. If you've ever been to the symbolic cemetery in High Tatras, you'll find plenty of wooden crosses with that design there.
Yeah, yes, you'll see it in Greek Catholic and Orthodox traditions rather than the Roman tradition.
And it's different than what you'll see in Western Slovakia. In Zaharia, for example, the tombstones are very similar to what you would see here in the United States, granite and the like, and stones on the ground. I've never seen this in that part of the. Gabby, you could probably.
That's correct, because Slovakia is actually the meeting point where Eastern and Western Christianity meet. So you'll have the Byzantium Christianity, going back to Constantinople and Byzantium, and then you have the Roman Catholic, and they have slightly different crosses. And at some point in the country, about midway from Poprad onwards, you'll see a fusion of both.
Yeah, there were also a fair amount of Jewish soldiers in the Austro-Hungarian army, and while I don't have any photos of it, I believe in the renovation or the restoration of some of the cemeteries, there may be some Jewish or Star of David symbols as well.
Yeah, so traditionally the Jewish community would have their cemetery slightly in a different location or in a different corner of the standard Christian cemetery, so they wouldn't be mixed. Obviously,
right.
in Bratislava.
These are military cemeteries, so they're
okay.
It's where the people died on the battlefield, not
right.
Unless their bodies were recovered. And I think some of us may have ancestors where, myself included, where their bodies were never recovered on the battlefield, and so there may be a cross, but not necessarily a body on the site.
One peculiarity that has struck me on the World War I cemeteries between Eastern Slovakia, where the battles took place, and southern Poland, is that the cemeteries that were erected in Poland and designed by other architects and such seem to be built quite a bit out of stone and metal, and seem to be far more permanent than the cemeteries that Yurkovich and other architects designed and built in Czechoslovakia at the time after the war. I've just been astounded that the cemeteries in Poland have been built relatively permanently, and then quite a few of the cemeteries in Slovakia disappeared and have had to be restored by the KVH club in Romania and such.
You know, do you
Oh,
think,
great.
think maybe there was some influence during the communist period where in Poland they were able to, you know, have a greater, you know, faith tradition prevail, whereas, you know, the communists had greater influence in Czechoslovakia?
I don't know, maybe it could actually just have to do with style. So, so Ron, you mentioned that you're seeing in Slovakia a lot of wooden cemeteries, yeah? Wooden?
Yes, there were quite a few of them built out of wood and in smaller areas without the.
Okay, so for me,
tower.
what just comes to mind, it's probably budgetary reasons. You know, if you had to all of a sudden do the rites for a lot of soldiers, putting up stone graves is a lot more costly than just putting up wooden crosses. So it could have to do with it'd be a cost issue.
And also with
Ronnie,
yeah. So sorry, so that would people would always source the materials that are available in the location. That's why in Eastern Slovakia we do see so many wooden cottages that we don't get in the West, just because the resource wasn't here. So the budget, like what was available to them, it could all be part of the explanation.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe, you know, a factor to consider is the transportation logistics. A lot of the cemeteries in Poland are on the sort of main roads or near main roads, whereas, you know, in Slovakia would be in the, you know, mountain foothills that are more, you know, difficult to simply transport.
Yeah,
so
that's true, because Slovakia, I mean, for most of its territory is mountainous. I mean, obviously not as high as the Tatra mountain peak, but Poland or Hungary doesn't have that same kind of geography that Slovakia has. So exactly, Mark, they were probably also restricted with transportation of rock.
Absolutely. So Mark, which is your favorite work by Juro Koric?
My favorite work. Well, you know, I just based on the, you know, personal family connection. Let's say cemetery is a favorite work, but it's just, you know, the beauty and the symbolism there. But also I do like that the federal house in Skalica. You know, it's again one place that I seen, and it's just you know, it's got the writing, you know, the culture home. It's now the tourism site, but it illustrates all of his talents, and again also, you know, there's a lot to really like. So a lot of the works in the Czech Republic, just the ornate carving and the preservation. When you think of all the maintenance that has to go into preserving that, it's just outstanding that these have survived. I actually, you know, I haven't been there, but it's you know, again, comparable, very favorable to Zakopane in Poland.
And actually, just to see another example of these wooden crosses that we're talking about, we have Yanka here. She provided a Zoom link, a website link in the chat. And if we click on that, we can see some actually very beautiful traditional wooden crosses done in the folklore style with some Slavic native faith symbols. And in the background, you see Detva, and you also can see just how green and in a way isolated the region is. So that would again influence the access to resources and rocks to build the stone cemeteries.
Yeah, I mean, again, because, you know, a lot of these are still being restored or restored relatively recently, I think there's an opportunity for mapping for genealogy purposes. One thing I want to mention, we're starting in the U.S., but I think we want to move globally, is to map all the cemeteries where Czechs and Slovaks are buried around the world, and you know, be happy to, I think, eventually populate some of these cemeteries on our as our project develops, and that will be a topic at our symposium, is you know, mapping cemeteries where Czechs and Slovaks are buried in recent as well. So you can, you know, that'll be a tool for further research and you know, visits.
Yeah, so I think we're about to we're leaning towards closing off the call. So any kind of the last questions, last opportunity to ask a question to Mark or to Gabrielle or myself.
Yeah, and if you have further things you think about afterward, you feel free to email me mdillon@cgsi.org. That's my email.
Mark, perhaps you could also write your email in the chat. That'd be
chat,
useful for
okay.
people. That way they could just copy and paste.
There you go.
So I hope you guys enjoyed today's webinar by donation and our first webinar of 2024. We're looking forward to having a lot more experts on our series this year, sharing unique, fascinating, fun aspects about Slovak history, heritage, culture, but also food. I'm personally hoping Gabrielle will be sharing a lot more about her food knowledge of Slovak culture. She's in the process of right now starting a new book that will document this heritage, which I'm personally very excited about. So I hope we'll be sharing more food-related webinars as well. And I also want to use this opportunity to thank you for your donation. If you did have the chance to donate, this webinar series is of course free, but we do welcome your support in whatever sum, small or large, that you want to give. It does support us and keeps this webinar series free, as well as supports Global Slovakia's many projects. So thank you in advance for your support of our work.
And thank you,
And
Mark,
thank you.
for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure, Susanna and Gabriella. So, yeah, we CGSI has had a relationship with Global Slovakia for going on 5 years now, beginning in 2019 with when you first came out with your Legend of the Linden book, and so we were honored to have you at our conference in Milwaukee last year.
Yes.
Yeah, it was actually, was it already last year?
Yeah.
Yes.
October.
Sorry, guys, just seems so recent. Yeah, so Gabrielle and I had a lot of fun actually attending the conference. I think it's an annual conference usually, but Mark, it didn't take place because of COVID. Is that correct?
Biannual. Yeah,
Biannuals.
Mhm.
And so there was something like, from my understanding, 300 participants that came from all over the United States to the event. And was
340 from all over the world, yeah, including people from Slovakia, Czech Republic.
Yes, so it was a great pleasure to participate and to continue our partnership with CGSI and also to present our research and work. So may our partnership and friendship only continue to strengthen and grow.
Okay, yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's great to be put together a webinar where you've got people everywhere from Alaska to go see you.
Yes. Indeed. And for those of you that would like to share this webinar with family and friends that weren't able to join us today live, there will be a replay that's made available. It's going to come to your inbox if you registered for this event, and please feel free to share it with your community.
And on that note, well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Mark, again. Have a wonderful rest of Saturday and of the weekend. And if you are not on our mailing list, please subscribe so you can always stay up to date with events and projects that we are working on. We will soon be announcing the next webinar, which will take place in February. Thank you and do videnia.
Do videnia, dobrú noc from Slovakia.
Bye from Minnesota.